Hi, I'm Travis Ferber. I'm a partner at Zero G Capital, and this is Sasha Stern. He's the general partner and CEO of Zero G Capital. We're here talking to Jensen Werley of the Denver Business Journal. So Jensen came to us from Florida, actually, where she was working at the Jacksonville Business Journal, came to Boulder in 2017, worked at BizWest, covering all the great things about Colorado. Cannabis industry, technology, breweries, and then moved over to the Denver Business Journal, where she covers technology and innovation.
And the hottest VCs in town.
That would be us. We didn't catch it.
Technically, that would be Monica gets to cover all the cool VCs, but sometimes I get some of it.
Okay.
When I can.
So Jensen is you're in the hot seat today.
Great.
The first time that you've ever been interviewed.
This never happens.
A real role reversal.
Yeah, this is really, my world is upside down.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, happy to.
So Jensen, you cover technology here in Denver, and we invest in technology firms, and we're technologists at heart, and also like big kids, really. And so you see a lot of different tech firms here in Denver, and then broadly across the state.
Yeah.
What in the last year, what has been the most interesting firm that you've seen?
Wow.
Only
really?
one. Only one.
Well,
you can make 3 if you want to.
Interesting firms I've seen.
Or trends
Yeah.
It's either the firm or the trend that you've seen that has been wow, this is really interesting. This is very different.
I don't know if this is different, but it's been fun to be part of, is the number of unicorns that are coming into Denver that were born and bred in Denver and are getting those high valuations. Because I feel like that's sort of not the only indicator, but it's an indicator of a pretty established hot tech community is when you start getting those private companies that have the big dollar valuations. And so having companies like Ibotta, EverCommerce all popping up, Checker now, which isn't born in Denver but has a big investment here. That's kind of fun because I think that is a status marker of Denver.
Sign of maturity for
Exactly.
How is that changing the tech scene?
As an
Big
outsider.
ways. Yeah, I think it means more talent opportunities, but more competition, because now you've got these companies with name recognition that are going to be looking and probably have the money to scoop up some of the really good talent. But also, I think it's important that a thriving tech community have some diversity. It's not good enough just to have the one big company. You need to have a few, because everyone needs a place to have their second and third job. So I think there's competition, but I think having those multiple successful companies is sort of a rising tides situation.
Raises all boats.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's symbolic of a maturing ecosystem, and that also the people that work at these firms are generally the next wave of entrepreneurs as well.
Yeah.
But we need people with that experience. We lack right now enough people running businesses or tech products at scale, right?
Yeah.
We have to import them opposed to creating them organically.
Yeah.
So to your point, it's absolutely critical, even though they might make hiring more difficult for startups today.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, also, the reality is there's a lot of great homegrown talent in Denver, but there's more job opportunities than there are people to fill those jobs. So the fact is, you need to bring in talent from out of state. So that's great, and Denver has a lot going for it. Quality of life, all of that. But if you and your partner are both technologists living in New York and someone wants to move to Denver, then there has to be another tech company for your partner to be able to get a job into. And so I think Denver's starting to hit that point where there's more than just one attractive tech company to come to. There's places where both people can work.
Oh, interesting.
Jobs.
Yeah.
So you're saying like a spouse gets knocked out of a job because
Exactly.
Totally.
I never even thought of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Well,
Denver's hitting the point
Not
where
married.
I'm not married, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I'm married. It definitely makes sense to me.
totally.
Always competing with his wife.
It's it's not fair that if you're both in tech, that only one should be able to get the successful job. And I
Yeah.
think there's probably a point where Denver was at that, and now it's less so.
Have you heard people say that? Like,
I've heard from companies like Ibotta who they're trying to be that company that can bring in people, but also it's something that they mentioned in interviews that they're considerate of, that that's why they're glad to have competitors in the space, although they're sort of in their own doing consumer tech, but to have multiple successful tech companies is really important for recruiting.
Where do you see so within tech, you mentioned Ibotta in consumer tech,
Mm-hmm.
There's the B2B space,
Yeah.
there's hardware, software. Where do you see like the most vitality within like the Denver, Boulder, Colorado area?
Yeah, I think Denver and Colorado does B2B software really well. I think there's a lot of companies that are doing that. Conga's another really successful one in Broomfield, who they're really, really good at that. There's more hardware. You're seeing companies like Starry coming in who are doing, internet service provider hardware. There's companies like Sphero that are doing that consumer hardware for sort of all ages. But I think when it comes to sort of Denver's bread and butter as far as like new tech, a lot of it's B2B software.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
That's what we see, I think. It's interesting, we have this whale of a company that somehow Denverites don't know about, and that is Aero Electronics.
Yeah.
Oh.
And you'd think they'd spill out people that would start companies in the hardware space, and they don't.
Yeah, although they just did a really cool new open lab that they've just invested a ton in, and it's basically, I think they're trying to get a little bit more on that, not spin off new companies. I think they're happy having their customers and getting the business, but they're doing some cool things in innovation and trying to partner with like smart cities and creating a space to do that sort of ideation and prototyping. But you're right, yeah, there isn't a ton of hardware companies in Denver unless you want to get into telecom, which Denver has a huge history of, and I think what's going on with Dish is going to be a really interesting thing to watch as Denver maybe gets back into being one of the very top leaders for telecom, mobile, broadband technology.
Well, let's talk about that. So Dish is this business is headquartered here. It's a cash cow, but it's part of a dying industry, and its leadership is looking to reinvent the company by being a data provider, right, instead of effective cable TV or satellite TV operator. What do you think that means for the ecosystem here? Do you think that they're going to be making big investments in hardware here?
If I knew what was going on in Charlie Ergen's head, I would probably be like a very, very rich consultant. But I do know that where they are today is not by mistake. This has been a very calculated, probably pretty genius plan by Ergen. This has been like endgame, that Dish gets the infrastructure and the boost it needs to be one of the 4 major national mobile networks. He bought all the spectrum with the mission of having 5G and competing with Verizon, AT&T, and now they are getting all of these assets from Sprint, T-Mobile, and guy might pull it off, which is going to be so fun to watch, seeing them go from this like satellite TV company that like my grandparents used to maybe right up there with Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. I don't know, and I don't know what that'll mean for like hardware investments in Denver, But I do know that they're like all in on 5G, and it's just going to be really cool to see a company do a pivot like that.
Yeah, I agree. What about space and we have these government bases, right? These military bases in southern Colorado. Do you feel like they're producing? They obviously produce kind of like these government-related contractor jobs, but are they producing tech and innovation within aerospace that's transferring to the private sector?
I used to cover aerospace more in my previous job, and now I have a coworker who's genius on all of that. I think the interesting thing with aerospace is so much of it gets connected with DoD government contracting, and so that really can make it hard to bring into private business. But you see companies like Rocor and Longmont that are, sort of leveraging their, institutional knowledge to be startups that are now contracting with, DoD, contracting with the government, but still private business. But I wish I had more of a finger on the pulse as to what companies like Ball are doing. But now I'm all about the Facebooks and Amazons, and it's crazy how out of touch you get, not covering it for just a little bit.
Yeah.
It's just all happening so fast, really fast paced.
Yeah.
Jensen, you are a journalist
Yes.
in an industry that is being impacted quite a bit by tech.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you seeing in your industry at DBJ? Are you over the hump? Is internet helping now?
Yeah, I think DBJ is doing great. We have the benefit of a parent company, American City Business Journals, that is really, sort of targeted what it does and knows what it does well, and that's giving really premium business insight to the business community. And I think, once you've got your mission down, then internet and writing stories for the web can be really helpful. I started journalism at a time when internet was the thing, it wasn't a question. So for me, I've always been a digital first journalist and write things for web, and then, print is a way to sort of make a story look cooler and give people that sort of tactile bit to it. But I love doing digital journalism because it's all about getting it quickly and out there for people. And the whole reason I went into journalism is because I love information and I have this curiosity, and so that sort of instantaneousness of the internet just fuels that.
Yeah, I'm curious. So I've never thought of this. You just described yourself as a digital native journalist, or
Yeah.
and you said that.
Yeah.
Is there internal? I guess is there a new versus old guard within newsrooms across America? Is there an issue there where
Maybe
the content
like-
needs to be different?
No, maybe like 10 years ago that was still a struggle, but I think now everyone's on board of
They're either on board or they're
out of a job.
probably, yeah. There's still nuances. There's reporters I work with who still, talk about story length in inches, like the inches on paper versus, word count. But, I don't think there's a question anymore of like, is this internet thing going to stick around? I think we know now that, and of course, we can get into social media and we can get into sort of web strategy, but luckily that's not my thing. I just get to report the news.
Is there a square inch to word count conversion?
It's not square inch. I think, God, let's see. I think it's 33 words per inch, but that could be wrong. And
now we're really
now
into
you know that
deep
I'm
into the
a word count journalist and not an inches journalist.
Do you think so Google recently announced they were going to be adjusting the way that stories were popping up in searching, and to try and favor those stories that were published first, or not published first, but like original sourcing, as opposed to like just like the fastest clicks out there.
Does your stuff get referenced by a bigger organization, and then they take credit, or I guess they get the traffic for something you produce?
I guess sometimes. I mean, more likely, like, we have news partnerships that come from on high, not with me, but like parent company partners with New York Times and does some story sharing like that. I mean, it's sort of the nature of the internet that sometimes a story will get pulled and your credit will be lost, and sort of just scream about it a little bit and move on. But
did that happen to you?
It has happened to me in the past. I mean, if you want to get into like the ethics of like big tech and how it affects the media, then we could get into it. But you might need like a whole new video series. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's as a tech journalist, it's can be frustrating seeing just the outsized influence that big corporate tech companies have on the media industry, which I think, maybe I'm naive, at its heart, I still believe is just an industry about providing accountability and information to the public. And so is it frustrating that like a Google algorithm, decides whether or not people see the stories I write? Like, yeah, a little bit, but it's just the games you gotta play with.
Yeah. Dude, how do you feel about clickbait titles? You don't like it?
I mean,
I feel like a lot of. Let me clarify.
Do you write your own titles?
Headlines, I always give them the old college try, but that's not one of the things I'm best at, and my editors are much better at getting headlines. There's clickbait, and then there's something that's clicky. Clickbait is some.
You'll never believe.
Yeah, totally.
So is that clickbait? It's like, you'll never believe what this Denver startup does, or
yes,
that's clickbait.
Yeah, versus like, this Denver startup pledges to hire 160 employees over 8 years.
But then why would I read the article? I already got the info I need.
No, you don't. You don't know which startup.
Okay.
You don't know what funding they have. You don't know what their strategy is for hiring 160. You've got enough information to know that you kind of want to read the article.
Yeah.
And for you want to know if they're taking investment, if they're in a seed round or a Series A, but you don't know enough to not click on my story.
I always click on your story. Just
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
I was talking about other people.
Yeah.
So I have a question that's, you don't have to answer this question, but this one's a bit of a tough one.
Okay.
Maybe a tougher one. Or maybe it's a little more personal. So, Trump, he attacks the news media all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And fake news has kind of grown as this like big boogeyman monster that's out there. And you mentioned earlier, you feel like you're a journalist who believes that the news is about holding people to account, accountable. How do you hold companies, or Trump is the prime example, but like, how do you hold companies or the people that you're interviewing to account when they can turn around and say, that's not true? And they have their own platforms now. Social media has kind of changed who is the arbiter of truth in the world. How do you think about that? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it a lot. Part of it is like, I'm a business journalist, so I'm sort of removed from some of the like political journalism, local journalism. I think reporters who are working at daily newspapers and get a lot of social media attacks, frankly, like, they have a very hard job, and I think that I have a lot of privilege working for a business paper with a very supportive readership and community we're writing about, and I think Denver Business Journal holds a pretty respected place in the Denver community, and so, to be frank, I haven't had a lot of pushback from companies I report on. I don't think I've ever had one of them try to say that I'm fake news or anything like that. I think they know that I'm not. But on the flip side, that means that I do hold a responsibility that I, as a journalist, and I think all journalists feel this way and do this, I can't mess that up. I can't ruin my reputation as a credible journalist by getting facts wrong, by putting my opinion into stories. So I am careful to fact check often, frequently, and well with the companies. And if I do mess up, which happens, you got to own it and you got to put in that correction. I think
how does the correction process work? Do you go to an editor and say, hey?
Yeah, I'll tell an editor, hey, like either I screwed up or there was a miscommunication and I thought they were saying this but they were saying that, and either we'll just correct the story and that's sort of the benefit of digital news, or we'll put in a full correction and explain what happened. And I think if we're going to hold businesses accountable, you have to hold yourself accountable as well.
Yeah. So I've got one last question for you that's less political than his question, but also political. Tech is replacing jobs, and really stands to impact society quite a bit. I think people are now more and more aware that business, and specifically businesses that produce technology, have this ripple effect in the social world.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you feel like it's your job to cover more of that and have an input on something like minimum wage? Because increase in minimum wage is going to mean that a lot of jobs get automated away in the foreseeable future.
It's a good question. I mean, I think yes, to a degree. I think I would be really doing a disservice if I talked about artificial intelligence with this like glowing review, which is not the business I'm in. I don't do reviews. I just report the news. So, but I think if I were to like turn a blind eye to some of the problems that can come up with technology, then I'm not really doing my job. So I think there has to be an awareness and an acknowledgement of things like what AI is doing to jobs, or what blockchain is doing. Talk about all of the tech improvements and the privacy concerns that come with them. So I do have to have sort of an overall awareness of what's going on policy-wise, what's going on to people. We don't write for consumers, we write for business, but even people who are in businesses are still sort of at their core consumers and individuals. So I'm always trying to keep that in mind, and if that's not my priority of a story, it has to be something that at least I'm thinking about, and a lens that I'm thinking about. And also, I think it's important to remember that as much as journalists are sort of these people with information and trying to not have biases, we're still humans that still have, these things are affecting me too. So I think that sort of human perspective benefits my reporting, that I'm thinking about, what would I do if, and what have I done when my privacy's been invaded or data's been leaked, and what are people thinking about, and thinking about sort of the double-edged sword of technology.
Jensen, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Appreciate what you do.
Thanks
and we
for
love the
having me.
DBJ. Thanks.
This is a lot of fun. Thanks.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, this is awesome.